Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to, I know for some people you've travelled quite a distance, but it'll be well worth it. This is a remarkable occasion. I'm happy to say that River Wolton will be reading for about 25 minutes this evening, and she will be joined at one point towards the end to talk about this, in essence, a remarkable collaboration with Emma Burley, the watercolorist and artist, who has made this book a joint project. I don't think River would mind me putting it in those terms. It is a really beautiful book, and we're very proud to have published it. I want to mention that Susanna Evans is in the background doing the real work here, and one task she has given herself is to garner the chat that comes in, the questions that you have for River or Emma, and about anything really, lottery numbers and so on, obviously, which we'll try and put to, I will be putting to River and Emma towards the end of the evening. In amongst the readings, I'm delighted to say there are videos. And there's music. There are musicians, Kate Thomas and Helen Lyle have put together, have composed music specially using River's lyrics, and we'll be hearing some of those. All of you know River, I guess. Many of you will know River. Anybody who doesn't but knows that rather remarkable magazine, The North, will have seen the Year, many of the poems from Year, as they were featured in 2 issues of The North, a fraction of the 365 days that there are. I'm going to bow out in a moment. I just want to say that Anne Sansom is in the other room. She's River's editor, really, and I know that other people have helped River with this book, and we're very grateful. It was always going to be good, but it's a really special item now. The book, I'll read something about this, which is: the intention to write a daily poem on the theme of kindness becomes a year-long meditation, honest and unflinching, as the pandemic arrives. This remarkable evocation of a unique year by former Derbyshire Poet Laureate River Wolton is illustrated throughout with beautiful watercolours by artist Emma Burley. And Willem Kuyken, the Rip Black Professor of Mindfulness and Psychology Science at Oxford, says, bringing kindness to life in 366 evocative poems and a series of exquisite illustrations, this year, with all its myriad manifestations, honest, direct, understandable, and so very real, it's a testament to how a year, 2020, that was both extraordinary but also very ordinary, could be endured and enriched by kindness. So I'm very glad that River is here to read for us now.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to everybody at the Poetry Business, Peter and Anne Sansom, Susanna, who's doing all the tech in the background, also the other people at the Poetry Business who've been involved, Pete and Jess and Katie. So many people have brought this book to life, to fruition. And as with a lot, perhaps all poetry, perhaps all art, it is truly a collaborative process. And so I'm really happy that we're going to be hearing from Emma Burley later on, the artist who's illustrated it. And I also wanted to mention Francesca Romano, our amazing designer, who has done such a fantastic job on the book. So I can't see you, dear ones, but I know you're there, and it's really, really wonderful to share this occasion with you. I'm going to read some of the poems. There are 366 in total. 2020 was a leap year, so we get the extra one, the extra poem. And I'm going to read more or less one from each month. And some of the shorter ones, by request, I'm going to read again a couple of times. So I know with poetry, sometimes, you know, blink and you miss it. They're kind of, you know, gone quite quickly. Susanna has posted in the chat a link where you can also see the poems that I'm going to read. So please do open that up and have a look and read along as I'm reading. Most of the poems that I've chosen are also on pages where there are some of Emma's beautiful illustrations, so you will get a taste of them as well. So this book started life in this little book, which my friend Helen, who we're also going to hear from tonight in her beautiful song that she's written, gave me in Christmas 2019. And I was on retreat on the 31st of December in 2019, and we were invited to set an intention for the year. And perhaps ambitiously, I set an intention for the cultivation of friendliness, of kindness, knowing that also in that intention, I would be meeting all the obstacles and all the things that get in the way of that. So I began to write in this little book, and as you can see, it got filled during the year. And at first it was very much that I was writing these poems simply for myself. But as we know, in 2020, the pandemic came along and the poems turned towards that, and also to many other things, the landscapes of great social injustice, of racial injustice that were revealed that year, partly that the virus revealed, and also the events of that year revealed. So I'm going to begin with the 1st of January. And this poem will be followed by a song that has been specially written by Kate Thomas, and there'll be an accompanying video. So here we go. 1st of January. Who will come aboard this ship as she weighs anchor and set sail? Who will come aboard? The being's mean nooks, tiresome habits, shadows. Come aboard the ship of friendship that risks setting its compass through uncharted waters towards kindness, towards love. So now we're going to hear the song that Kate Thomas has composed for this poem.
As she weighs anchor, as she sets sail, who will come aboard this ship? As she weighs anchor, as she sets sail, who will come aboard? Who will come aboard? Come aboard. Who will come aboard this ship? As she weighs anchor, as she sets sail, who will come aboard this ship? As she weighs anchor, as she sets sail, who will come aboard? 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 Who will
So that extraordinary song written by Kate Thomas and accompanying herself on the handpan starts us off on our journey through the year. And the robin in that first video accompanies the poem on the 19th of January, which is the one I'm going to read now. 19th of January, cusp of a cold, bright day, cold night, and dusk is lit by liquid notes. I pinpoint a robin in the hazel, chest feathers puffing out with each snatched breath. For a while, everything else kneels down and falls away. So continuing on into February. And one of the things that kept me going in 2020 and still nourishes me is running. I run very, very slowly, practically at walking pace, in fact. And there are a few poems about running. This is one of them, the 3rd of February. Running in the morning lanes, falling forward with familiar rhythm, 3 strides to an out-breath, and held wherever I turn by a cradle of birdsong. And I'll read that one again just to mirror this rhythm of the running. And as I read it, I'm remembering that spring, the early spring, where it seemed the birds were all coming alive and where the weather that year was very warm, unusually sunny. Running in the morning lanes, falling forward with familiar rhythm, 3 strides to an out-breath, and held wherever I turn by a cradle of birdsong. We come to March, and of course in March, coronavirus came closer and closer. And on the 15th of March, my partner Fiona and I were walking in Derbyshire in Lathkildale. And I remember on this particular day, I think we went for Sunday lunch in a pub, and there was already a sense of things changing. It was no longer a buffet. That had been all that kind of health and safety was coming into play, and the conversation that we overheard, and indeed our own conversation probably, was more and more about coronavirus. 15th of March. There is coronavirus, and there is the sky. The shallow waterfalls of Lathkildale, 2 swans preening, wild white violets, a dipper flitting from rock to depths. I've read so much news, I feel unwell. Grateful for stopping at twilight to listen to calm words. Grateful for awareness that can be the ground where everything unfolds. Continuing into April. And by now, of course, we're in lockdown. And as you may have also witnessed, Animals come closer, nature comes closer, and perhaps we come closer to it, valuing those restricted hours of the daily walk, the times when we can go outside the house. So the next poem is the 18th of April. 5 stags emerge from bracken and birch. A wren chirrups across the lane, lambs and sheep in 2-tone octaves. Then we hear owls. We don't see badgers, only mouths of sets. Later, a Horizon special on coronavirus. Snakes writhing in mesh bags. Cages of chickens, pigs. A rabbit gnawing metal. And a small brown bat. 1,000 heartbeats to a minute. May. And in May, as you may remember, it became possible to have the first COVID tests. And by now I had begun to have symptoms that actually continued through the year, and which I came to realize were long COVID. So this was my first COVID test, 26th of May. And I remember it took us a long time to find the place. 26th of May. We drive to a car park outside Buxton. Squaddies in desert camouflage drop a test on the back seat. I scoop at my tonsils, trying not to retch or stare at other drivers peering down their throats in rear-view mirrors. I've read far too much about Dominic Cummings. So to June, and there was some easing of lockdown. And on the 13th of June, I was shopping, and that sense of there being more people around, shops busier. And I remember that transition from having those weeks and months of relative isolation and keeping the distance always, wherever we went. So this is one of the poems that really speaks to some of the obstacles to kindness. 13th of June. Streets full, shops busier. Irritation sparks at queues, at those who cross my path and take too long deciding. This is where patience wakes, not in long hours of studying clouds, but in stepping back and pausing while someone cuts across to reach for the tomatoes. And I'll read that one again. 13th of June. Streets full, shops busier. Irritation sparks at queues, at those who cross my path and take too long deciding. This is where patience wakes. Not in long hours of studying clouds, but in stepping back and pausing while someone cuts across to reach for the tomatoes. And if you're able to see the PDF on the link, you'll see that there are thistles on that page, which seems really kind of apt for that prickly sense of impatience. We're into July. And this is a very short poem, but one I really love, and particularly for this beautiful picture of the cow that Emma has drawn, painted. So it's the 8th of July. Praise the gentle company of ruminants, their single-mindedness. As I read that, I can remember the exact cow that inspired this poem. It was actually a kind of creamy coloured cow, and it was just doing its thing, chewing the grass, and it felt like such a blessing on that day. I'll read it again. 8th of July. Praise the gentle company of ruminants, their single-mindedness. So I realized that this is a lot of poems, and we've got a whole sweep through the entire year. So I hope that it doesn't feel like too much. The next poem is one of the longer ones, and it's the 2nd of August. And in August, it was possible to see people outside and have visits from family. And yeah, this poem was inspired by the gratitude, really, for being able to see that, and for many other things. 2nd of August. Grateful to run. Grateful for eggs, for trains and the playground, for the outdoor swimming pool open again. Grateful for standing on one leg competitions to lighten frustration at queuing, for the kids' delight at being in the water. Grateful for walking home along the river. Grateful for questions and roast cabbage. Grateful for a clean bed to hold the weary bones and aching head. In September, I was lucky enough to be able to take some time to go and stay at a friend's house in Filey, the coast of East Yorkshire. And it felt like, after all those weeks and months, getting on a train and going somewhere felt like an enormous adventure. Probably you can remember these kind of moments from your own experience in 2020. So I had this time to write, and as with all writing projects, many obstacles and things getting in the way, and this poem really speaks. It's the 9th of September, and it speaks to that process of navigating the inner critic. 9th of September. Early morning jog. I misjudge the tide, and soon I'm ankle deep. Later the sea goes out, and kids careen across the half-mile beach, spades in hand. In front of the laptop, I'm at the raw edge of coherence. One floppy word after another, like dead fish. But then I remember the toddlers with oversized sun hats and fistfuls of sand, learning to run. October. This is the 31st of October. I hold my COVID-grown ponytail above my head and slice through it with the kitchen scissors. Johnson announces a second lockdown. I hold my COVID-grown ponytail above my head and slice through it with the kitchen scissors. Johnson announces a second lockdown. So we're coming into November, and at this time I was both reading a lot of news, particularly about the American elections, and also trying to avoid the news when I could, trying to avoid that extraordinary sense of worry. And this is the 2nd of November, and this was a day when I had put aside the news apps and switched off the radio and tried to let other things in. The 2nd of November. A simple joy slips into finger holes and crevices and builds from many sources. Long-tailed tits wittering in silver birch, clusters of nitrous bonnet caps, a beech limb rippling with curtain fungus, light filtered through a lacy canopy. I let it grow. Keep out the news. Keep in new knowledge that the acorns underfoot are raining down from oak trees everywhere. Plentiful. A mast year. So I think I learned that it was a mast year from Autumn Watch. And it really was incredible to see this absolute carpet of acorns everywhere, and the trees laden with them. And I'm going to read that one again because it's good to bring in the joy when we can. 2nd of November. A simple joy slips into finger holes and crevices and builds from many sources. Long-tailed tits wittering in silver birch, clusters of nitrous bonnet caps, a beech limb rippling with curtain fungus, light filtered through a lacy canopy. I let it grow. Keep out the news. Keep in new knowledge that the acorns underfoot are raining down from oak trees everywhere. Plentiful. A mast year. And if you're wondering how I knew that they were nitrous bonnet caps, I have an app on my phone that identifies fungi and other things. So that's where that came from. The next poem is also a November poem, the 7th of November. And this is one that Helen Lyle has written a song for. So I'm going to read the poem and then we will hear Helen's song and the accompanying images from Emma's beautiful artwork. 7th of November. The trees lose all their leaves, but they're not dead. In summer, they make food from light and water. We stare at them across the playground, and nothing is unworthy of awe.
The trees lose all their leaves, but they're not dead. They're not dead. In summer they make food from light and water. Ooh, we stare at them across the playground. And nothing, oh nothing is unworthy. Nothing nothing is unworthy of awe. The trees lose all their leaves, but they're not dead. They're not dead. And in summer they need food from light and water. Ooh, we stare at them across the playground, and nothing, oh nothing, nothing is unworthy. Nothing is unworthy of awe.
Even though I have heard that many, many times now, it still really moves me, and I feel such profound gratitude to Helen, who not only gave me the book that all the poems are written in, but has written that extraordinary song. So there's just 2 more poems left, and I'm going to read the 7th of December with this beautiful image of the heron. Grey heron lances upstream between the river banks as I slump step through Monday morning. She opens a gap in gloom, and later for the sun to pierce through late afternoon, where there's the usual mix of disbelief and chocolate. I'm violently allergic to the words Brexit trade talks. So we come to the last poem of the year. And this is one that Kate Thomas has also set to music, some of the words from it in any case. And it's the 31st of December. And I wrote this poem on the stroke of midnight. So it was indeed the very minute that Brexit happened. And at the same time, WhatsApp was full of messages. And one link in particular that someone sent me was this extraordinary poem that had been written by Jackie Kay, and that had been set to these drones lit up with different colours that kind of formed different shapes and flew over the skies of Scotland to celebrate Hogmanay. So that's what the reference is in this poem. 31st of December. What does the last day have to say? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear. At this very minute, Brexit happens. COVID deaths soar. WhatsApp buzzes with flowers, fireworks, with drones glowing poems over Edinburgh, with friendship. Thank you for this ship, the crazy ride where love itself became the journey and the tide. So we'll now hear the final song from Kate Thomas.
Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the tide. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the tide. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the journey. Love was the tide. Thank you. Love was the journey.
So I promised some people that chickens would feature, and there they were in that final slide. And chickens do have several poems devoted to them. So I hope that if you get the book, you will enjoy those chicken moments. So I think we're going to have some conversation now. And here's Peter.
Hello, River.
Hello.
I think Emma isn't far behind. We've already had a question, which is rather nice.
Mm.
Do you mind me kicking off with a question straight away?
Please
It's
do.
from your friend Robert Hamburger. It's a great collection, River, but that's horrible, isn't it? When I'm wondering how difficult it felt, says Rob, to produce a poem 366 days running, or whether the process felt like an exciting experiment.
Oh, thanks so much, Rob, for that question. And also want to really appreciate Rob for his support with this project, because he's just been wonderful with it and, you know, helped with a lot of the editing. So the answer is really, yes, it was very difficult on some days, and on other days it did feel like an exciting experiment. There were days when it felt absolutely impossible and I wondered what on earth I'd done, and to sort of keep going, and it felt like really kind of squeezing every single, you know, possible drop of creativity out. And then there were other days when it just, when the words kind of flowed. So but I really appreciated having set that intention, and particularly when COVID came along, it felt like it sort of provided a holding and a kind of reassurance. And so every night when I wrote the poem, I would look back at the previous month and just see what had been happening, and it gave a kind of structure which really felt like there was a lot of emotional support in the process of doing it. And then of course, like I said, there were days when it felt impossible, and some of the poems are very, very short, you know, some of them are just like really a few words, because that's all it was.
Do you mind me asking if you felt enabled by the diary kind of format, and knowing that you were working with Emma at some stage, did that give you the permission to write shorter poems and poems that, because what I really like about the book is that it's really varied, and you do respond almost sometimes moment by moment. So you're running or walking or being out in the world, whether in a forest or in the world. What's really wonderful is the way that you managed to capture that time in a short space. And I think normally with poems, don't we feel you've got to do more than that, but actually it's enough, isn't it?
Yes, and just to say that I had no idea that it was going to be a collaboration with Emma, so that wasn't in my mind. I think I probably didn't mention it to Emma until after 2020 had happened. Is that your recollection, Emma, as well? I'm pretty sure that
I can't remember. Everything's so blurry now. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that it was only after I'd got to the end of the year and I got in touch with you and I said, I've written all these poems.
Because I did some of them, I think, before you'd finished.
Ah, okay.
I could be wrong, but I definitely had it in 2 batches. You definitely sent me it in 2 batches.
We collaborated before on a project that was also a kind of poem a day type thing, just over a 3-month period. So we had done this sort of thing before.
Yeah, maybe I could be getting a bit hazy.
You'd worked on Betweenity, hadn't you? For example, do you want to say something about that? What's interesting about John Barron has just come in and asked exactly this question about how did the poems did one respond to the other, and that's what we're hearing. I was wondering, Emma, about this time you weren't working in colour, and colour is I think it seems to be very important to you.
Yes,
working in black and white.
Yeah, it was quite a challenge for me actually, and I might not have said yes except that it was River, and I just jump at any opportunity to work with River and illustrate her beautiful poems, which really always just bring up so many gorgeous images for me. But yeah, actually it was a really great experience because I had to really think about tone and I had to think about texture and how I could get the most out of watercolor without using any color. So really thinking more about the water and how I can use that watery texture to get, these interesting textural results. So yeah, that was fun. I wanted to mention something else actually that came up because you were talked quite a bit about chickens, River, and I remember that something around the collaboration process for us was that we had some disagreements over chickens, but I'd forgotten and it all came back to me. Do you remember? So River was like, nobody would hold a chicken like that. Remember? And I get it now because obviously there's a lot of chicken lovers who are likely to be reading this book, and they would also be concerned about that chicken not being held correctly. But I love the opportunity to draw chickens, and hopefully my mum is watching right now. She's really loves chickens. She's got several, and I've fallen in love with chickens as a result as well. So yeah, the presence of many chickens in the book was a big draw for me.
It may be I grew up watching black and white television, so maybe I'm gifted, or I've learned. But you don't notice that the images are black and white. They do feel they're full, aren't they? And similarly, River, I know you'll agree that they're often kind of 3-dimensional. They don't seem. It's part of that experience of the poem and the image together. Actually, I think that helps that to happen.
And I love the way that the textures come through of the actual paper that you were working on, Emma. And it's something that I only really noticed actually when the book was in print, that there are layers and layers of texture there, and I could start to see what kind of paper you were using.
Right.
And I really, really love that depth. But I mean, in answer to John's question, I think the poems came first, and the images were in response to that. But we did play around a bit with, the different chicken images or different, there was quite a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, for sure. And River shared that sometimes an image I made didn't correspond to what was in her head. And sometimes even, I was saying that for me, it wasn't always what was in my head either. It was sort of what came out on the page. And I was wondering if the process of writing poetry is similar, that you might start with an idea, but what comes out doesn't quite look like what you had in your head. And then the sort of process of us both coming to terms with that. Sometimes the illustration wasn't, quite what either of us had visualized, but actually maybe it works. And I think the interesting sort of challenge with illustration is, are you adding anything? Or are you just sort of saying the same thing with a picture? And yeah, trying to get that right without adding something that's not appropriate or relevant, or doesn't support the poem. Yeah.
I think your images of birds are particularly stunning and kind of lift the poems into a new dimension. And I really, really love them. They're one of my favorites.
Thanks. I also just want to mention that I think Francesca Romano might still be on the call. And she was our designer, and she was absolutely brilliant. So a part of the reason the book looks so good is because Francesca's ability to sort of see where to put the images in relationship to the poems, and to really think about the book as a canvas, I guess, to give everything breathing space, and to really balance images with words, and to think quite creatively about where to place the images. You've got, she's waving at us on the chat. So you'll see there's like images that sort of come in from the sides of the panel, which really kind of expand the space a bit, I think. So yeah, thanks,
I think
Francesca.
that's why it does seem like it is a collaboration, because the poems have their own space, but they're not alongside, they're with the illustrations somehow. And paradoxically, that's because they've got enough, they've got room, haven't they, on the page. The pages are quite generous, and the poems are often quite short, as you say. So like that year of pandemic, when time was it was weird. I can see why you said that it was useful. It was helpful having that structure of the diary of poems. Because space and time were weird for a while, weren't they? It's hard for us to remember quite how strange and frightening it was, and how actually it was a horrible time for many people.
Yeah.
There were losses, weren't
Yeah.
there? Anne Tanner asks, do you find, River, that the poem just arrives?
Sometimes on a good day. Most often not particularly. But what I found was that often I'd stop, I'd get my little book at the end of the day, and an image would come from something during the day, maybe that hadn't even kind of really recognized at the time. It would just suddenly sort of come to me, and then be like, okay, that's something for today. But also the sense that I knew I was going to write a poem at the end of each day, I think sharpened my vision and sharpened my awareness, so that things kind of jumped out at me a bit more. So there was a kind of interesting, back and forth between those two things, I think. If that makes sense.
Yes. Is there a difference? Is there a difference with the way that you write? You've published 3 collections with us that we love, and the poems are not more substantial in some ways, but they're more kind of poem shaped. Do you feel there's a difference? And is your current writing? Are you writing new poems which are influenced by this experience?
Possibly. I mean, I'm quite into this kind of diary format, although I may have taken it to the extreme now. I've done a whole year. But it would be interesting to kind of follow that up again. In fact, at the moment I'm writing prose. Emma and I have a new project in the pipeline that is a prose project. So that brings a whole other load of challenges. So I'm not actually writing any poetry at the moment. And it's nice to have a little pause, because I mean, a usual poetry collection is what, kind of 40 or 50 poems, you know, to kind of take on editing 366 was, you know, I mean, it took a long time, and it could have taken many more years, actually, if I'd really wanted to keep on polishing them. And I want to again thank Rob Hamburger, because he very generously offered to look at them and do some editing. And normally in a kind of poetry exchange, you might send each other like a few poems, or, you know, I'm working on these few poems, could you take a look and send me some comments? But here I was sending him 366 and with great generosity and patience, he read through them very carefully and gave me some really, really helpful feedback. So yeah, that was a very important part of the collaborative process.
Knowing Rob a little, I'm not surprised that he did that. But knowing your poems, I can see it wouldn't be a labour.
There's just another thread of the friendship, really, that runs through this book. So many friends have given such support and encouragement and a part of it, and that collaborative sense. And I'm just
Can you say
noticing
something about the songs, River?
Yeah, the songs.
And Jill Angood asks, will they be available anywhere to hear again? But say something about how they came about.
How they came about was, you know, very late on, literally a couple of months ago, if that. I had sort of this idea popped into my head of, you know, having some music as part of this. And so I asked Kate and Helen if they would be willing, and I sent them, you know, here's 366. And, you know, they, in an incredibly short space of time, wrote these songs and, you know, recorded them with all the parts. So yeah, they're stunning. And I hope that I think that Susanna's going to paste a link into the chat where they can be heard. And I'm really hoping that they will have, you know, an ongoing life. Yes, Susanna's saying yes, that they will be able to, you know, be able to hear them again through those links, because yeah, it's really worth listening to them several times. And I know, Emma, you hadn't heard some of them before, so I wanted to check in with how that was.
Yeah, they were so beautiful. I hadn't heard the ones with the hand drum, and I really loved that. But I think that really added something really gorgeous. But yeah, absolutely beautiful. It was really lovely to hear them. And yeah, I thank you for putting my images into films as well. I really enjoyed hearing the words, the images, and the beautiful music all together. It's really lovely.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that, you know, each sort of edition takes it all to another level. It's like there's a kind of transmuting process of yeah, I'm kind of a bit lost for words at the moment, but that the way that, yeah, putting the images on the words and then putting the songs on that, just it takes it into a whole other kind of realm. And I
like how sorry,
go ahead.
No, just yeah, have you know, your poems spark more creativity, and then that sparks more creativity, and yeah, it's really lovely how it can.
Yeah.
And Susanna will correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be available, won't it, for other people to listen to, or for us to listen to again through YouTube. But also, I thought it'd be nice to have some of the poems. Yes, it'll stay on YouTube, Susanna says. And there'll be a section, there is a section called East of the North. That probably will be a place where, on our website, the Poetry Business website, where we'll perhaps find a space for these poems, and as well as your page on our website. I'm assuming this will happen. I'm only questioning whether I'm not au fait with how websites work, really. Can you just I know that we're running out of time, but I just want to ask about this new collaboration. I'm very interested in this. Emma, do you want to say something about how far along you are, and where are you scheduled for? And
I think it's probably better River talks about it, actually. But yes, I will be illustrating for River, and there will be some back and forth, I think, because we've already started that process. But
So that's what I mean, is that will be different really to this. This is a collaboration year, but River was on her own for a lot, as all of us were really. Yes.
Well, River will be leading this other project as well, but I will be her illustration support person. Yeah, but you're leading this project, I would say, for sure. Yeah. Well, do you agree? I don't know.
Yeah, yes, to some extent. You know, and also, yeah, it depends on what the publisher wants and all that kind of thing. We're sort of, you know, working to their kind of particular needs and schedule. But yeah, again, a collaboration. It's really wonderful to have an opportunity to work with Emma again. And it's a prose book on the theme of sustainable compassion. So it's, yeah, looking at how we can sustain ourselves and be sustained in these times of great challenge, bringing in different frameworks from a sort of meditation from a Buddhist context, but it also has poetry in it, obviously the images, and it has a lot of kind of creative emphasis. So yeah, it's prose, but it's on the creative edge of prose. And I also wanted to just bring in one of Emma's amazing books that are in full color. This is Soul
also
Colour.
Designed by Francesca.
Also designed by Francesca. Soul Colour, and there's another one, Earth Colour. These are incredible, just beautiful, beautiful books on watercolor painting. So yeah, plug for that.
Thanks,
and available at all good
everywhere, all good bookshops.
Yeah. Fantastic. We are going to end soon, aren't we? You're going to read a poem to bring the evening to a close for us. Before we do, though, I did want to mention River's other books and that they're available from us, and that this one is available free of postage, isn't it? Which, considering the size of it, from us, I don't know, you probably know this, people who have been looking at the chat, that you can click on the link and somehow you'll be sent it free of charge. One of the wonderful things about working with poets is being surprised by what turns up, what you get. It's always much more than you think it's going to be. But in this case, it's so much more. Because it's a collaboration, I suppose it is, and because you started writing these poems not knowing that the pandemic was going to happen and it was going to change the way that you interacted with the world and the time that you were given by, literally being, obliged to be separate. So we're really keen. I mean, that people do get hold of this book and spend time in it and enjoy it. It's a really wonderful thing that that didn't exist before, and here it is out in the world. It's wonderful, and this evening has been a really special time too. I'm hoping that one or two of you, that either of you, will say something now before River reads her last poem.
Just thanks again, Peter and Susanna and everyone at the Poetry Business and everyone who's had a part in bringing this book into fruition, which is many, 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 many people, and so grateful for the friendship, for the communities that I am blessed to be a part of. And thank you so much to dear Emma for this ongoing wonderful journey of collaboration.
Lovely. Thank you, River.
I'm going to read the poem for the 4th of December today. And on this particular 4th of December, 2 years ago, I was beginning yet another long Zoom, many days of Zoom. And this was the response. It was cold. The snow had just started to fall. The 4th of December. Snow edges trees, picks out new angles. I sit sideways to Zoom, hoping to look attentive, but captivated by the blots and blats that sweep and whiten sky. Let's take off this oh so grown-up talk. Roll it into snowballs, shriek and slither. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much, everybody who's been here, and yeah, whether you've been sideways to Zoom or full on, wishing you, yeah, good health and take care in these days and weeks. Bye.